Good morning, guys. How are you today?
Good. Where do you want to go?
Wherever you want to go, I guess. I will say this: I was at a meeting last night, so I did not watch virtually any of the high school championship games, so I cannot speak intelligently about it.
I was
other than I know who won the game, and Stu Postel did a great job of writing about it. But yeah, I was otherwise engaged last evening.
Oh no! So you thought I was saying where do you want to go on the topic selection? I was saying where do you want to go to cover a bowl game?
Oh, I think where most people want to go is will require Nebraska to beat Iowa. So that would be the ReliQuest Bowl on December 31st, playing a fairly upper tier SEC team, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with going to Tampa. If you're just talking cities, I think Nashville's a great city.
Yep.
So if they want to send us to the Music City Bowl, we'll enjoy going there, and that's a fun time and not quite as hard of a team. I think it was Mike Schaefer put it on Twitter, and he's right. I don't want to see him play Vanderbilt. That's not.
No.
That wouldn't be ideal. That would be the preferred option there. Not that I don't think they could beat Vanderbilt, but that would kind of, that would be kind of a bummer. But I don't think Nebraska is any really much better than Vanderbilt, so it would be fair if that's what they chose to do.
You documented it pretty well. There was joy, there was relief, the vibe was different. It was like, finally, the monkey is off the back. The streak has been broken. It was against Wisconsin. The manner in which they did. I don't want to make any sweeping generalizations of down the road or what happens Friday night in Iowa City, but I'm going to let you do that. What do you think Saturday meant for the current team? And is there anything that happens Saturday that will mean something moving forward, starting Friday and beyond?
Yeah, so I think it means a ton. Obviously, it's a memory they'll get to have for the rest of their lives, and they'll be able to say we were the team that got back to a bowl game, and those guys will cherish that. We were the team that broke the losing streak. They'll cherish that. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be sort of upheld and honored there. I do think this Matt Rule can show the film of that game and say, here's what it's going to look like, guys. Here's what it's going to become. Recruit in 2026. Here's what it's going to become. Michael Terry, who still hasn't technically decided where he's going to college. Here's what it's going to look like. And, I really do believe that if Nebraska got the football right, what they have in place for NIL is pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. What they have in place for revenue sharing is elite. Their facilities are top 5 in the country. And Nebraska can be a cool place to go, very, very quickly. If they can figure out how to get the football right, they will not be far away from being very, very good, very, very fast. Because I think the players will come. I really do. Not all of them, obviously, but I think a lot of the players will come. And if you look at the way that Oregon and Ohio State have built their programs, they are not building their programs with guys that are from 200 miles away. There are good players at Ohio State from Ohio, but that's not their best players. Nebraska can do this, but they've got to get the football right. They have to have a couple of big seasons in a row. And if they did that, if they can convince enough recruits, hey, this thing's going in the right direction, it could get pretty sweet pretty fast. And so I think Saturday is maybe something they can show to people and say, hey, we're not just about the rhetoric. This is what we're actually doing as a program.
Sam, game 2 under Dana, and they just looked a lot more comfortable than even they did the week before. It's amazing. Yes, you're at home, but from one week to the other, it was almost night and day. Everybody seemed to start settling into roles.
For sure. I think one of the things that Dana's been able to do is just get the ball in play. And to use a college baseball term, when you put the ball in play in college baseball, the third baseman isn't necessarily a Gold Glover. And so what you do is you're forcing college football players, linebackers, safeties to make plays that they A, can't necessarily always make, and B, don't make consistently. But you've got to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands in order to do that, right? If your quarterback's not a runner, and he's not, you got to get the ball out of his hands, because him holding that ball for 7 seconds and either getting sacked or throwing it away doesn't get you anything. And so I think Holgorsen has basically said, hey, we're going to get the ball out of your hands fast. And in doing so, we're going to let somebody go try to make a play. And in doing so, we need other guys to block. Like, I think he's probably put a logic to it that they understand and that Dylan likes. Like, I don't think Dylan really wants to sit back there and hold the ball for 17 seconds. I think he wants to get rid of the football. So that's part of the thing that I think they've done is they've just given a little bit more tempo to the process. There's a little bit more fluidity to it. And, again, are Emmett Johnson and Ja'Cory Barney the best playmakers in the country? No, but they're pretty good. And again, the defenders that you're facing are not always elite. Wisconsin does not have an elite defense. So, you see things like that. And you saw, Wisconsin missed some plays. They didn't tackle well. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. But you know what? Nebraska put them in that conflict. If you go back and watch the UCLA game, Dylan Royal is holding on to the ball over and over and over again. I'm like, you can't make any plays downfield unless you throw it. And I think they're getting the ball out of his hands and he's making some plays.
How much do you also think that the new OC, him having, I think, the final say on the rotation at running back, wide receiver, and tight end has also helped this offense?
Huge. I'm not sure why Marcus Satterfield didn't feel the power to do that. I don't really know. I don't know if that was Matt Rule that was coming in and overruling Satterfield. I have no idea. It's hard to tell. But I did say, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago to you guys, that I felt like hiring Dana Holgorsen was Matt Rule saying, I'm taking my whisk out of the kitchen. And I don't actually know what I don't know what I'm doing to the level that Dana Holgorsen does. And so I think in hiring Holgorsen, even for a brief time, he was basically saying, I'm handing the vision casting and the shaping of this over to him, and he can do it. And I think Rule has probably taken a half step back. And that's probably a good thing. Like, I just think that's, Rule has allowed Holgorsen to say some hard things in practice. I'm sure Rule said some of those things, maybe not quite as harshly as Holgorsen did, but it just didn't get through. And now I think it's probably getting through. They're like, oh, Dad brought in this guy. Well, Dad's fine. Dad's done trying to tell us. He's going to bring in the drill instructor to tell us. And that's basically what's happened. It's like, Dad's like, you don't want to listen to me? All right, you're going to listen to this guy. And I think they probably like him. I think Holgerson's a pretty likable person. He's not a jerk, not a jerk in that way. And so
Very
I think
approachable.
It's been effective.
Yep.
It'd be real easy for them to just say, okay, we got bowl eligible. We're good now. But you said something in your article that I didn't realize this, that Rule said that some of the Iowa players last year were waving at their guys saying, have a good Christmas. When I read that, I see that as, that's got to have their attention, because especially the way that game ended last year, that had to hurt just a little bit more. Now that you're over the bowl hump, now you can address this, which, if anything, I think almost evens the playing field if they come out with that intensity.
Agreed. This rivalry is a rivalry, and Iowa does not like Nebraska. Now, some of that, I think, was fueled by Brian Ferentz, who's not there anymore. He's gone. I think his level of relish for beating Nebraska was very high, based on just some various things Nebraska had said over the years, or whatever Sean Eichhorst said. And so I think Brian pumped that thing up over there a little bit. Simultaneously, I think the other Iowa coaches pump it too. I think there's, between Iowa and Minnesota, I think there's some respect. I think there's some respect between Iowa and Wisconsin. I think between Iowa and Nebraska, there's a real pleasure on the Iowa side of kind of shoving it in Nebraska's face. And so Nebraska, I think, has gotten to that point where they feel the same way. And some of that's the way that Iowa reacts. They blew kisses 5 years ago. They did the waving goodbye last year. They're a different program when they play Nebraska. I think Iowa's a pretty respectful program overall, but that one game, it brings out something in them. And I think it's personal a little bit to Ferentz and to the others over there. And so Nebraska needs to match that. And I think Nebraska's finally starting to get around to matching that. I think you've seen Nebraska basketball begin to match that in the Creighton series. In fact, I say Nebraska wants that game more now than Creighton does. And I think you've seen that the last couple of times in CHI. So, I think Nebraska football's finally getting there with Iowa. and that's a good thing. It needs to be a rivalry game, and it is now.
Sam McKewon of the World-Herald joining us. But with Iowa, they're going to do what they do. They're going to play good defense. They're going to have good special teams. They're going to hand the ball off to Caleb Johnson. They might run it in a cold night 60 times.
Right.
Jackson Stratton appears to be the guy that will start, but today Kirk speaks to the media, and there is the outside chance that Sullivan could be available, but they'll start Stratton, and Cade McNamara is not even on their depth chart. So with that said, an area which we are all trying to figure out and just make it through the season is the defensive backfield, and we all go, what's going on? What do you think that deep dive personnel philosophy looks like in the offseason with John Butler involved?
That's a great question. I think there's going to have to be just a sense of who the personnel is, right? You're going to have to let the transfer portal shake out. I think we feel confident Tommy Hill is leaving, right? He's going to the NFL. And Gifford is gone. Singleton is gone. So that's 3 starters that you have to replace right there. I don't think their preference is to have Buford and Hartzog playing corner. So can you find a couple other corners? Is Sear Wright going to go to the NFL? Does Sear Wright need another year? I don't know. I think that's going to be a question that Sear's going to have to examine. He's played college football for 4 seasons.
Yeah.
So this isn't like, he's a redshirt sophomore. He's been around, and maybe he wants to come back and improve his draft stock, and they'll probably give him some NIL money to do so. So I think they may keep him, but they have to find new personnel, and then I think they have to decide what they want their coverage strategy to be. And honestly, Gary, some of this has to do with the linebackers. Can those guys take a leap in their coverage skill set and in their ability to stop the run? Do they have a jack linebacker that they feel really good about dropping?
That's a great point.
It's hard to say, and do they feel like John Bullock is gone. So do they have a guy that can, drop into the hook zone and do the things that John did? Because John was pretty good at that. John was arguably better at that than even the guys they had last year. So, and they hit a couple RPOs. Wisconsin did for sure. I have to go back and chart who they hit them all on. Some of them I think were on Bayer. So there's a bunch of different things they have to examine, and then they have to decide what kind of coverage structure they want. So long as you're in that 3-3-5, you have what's called a split safety or a rover, and it naturally tends itself to cover 3 because you've already split the field up into thirds anyway. And so, it naturally lends itself to that. But I know they've tried more cover 2, and they've obviously gone man. Now, some people call man cover 4 because it functions like that. Some people call it cover 0 is a 0 blitz where it's just tight man to man. So they have a bunch of different coverage strategies, and they have to decide what they like. I know that what Iowa does is Iowa chooses to play quarters/cover 2 coverage. It's a little bit of the same thing, but they play this kind of a specific kind of coverage, 4-man front, linebackers behind it, and they do the same thing over and over again, and they try to perfect it. And Nebraska is much more exotic. And I do wonder if the day comes when Nebraska's like, our personnel is good enough that we can make the package of things that we do smaller so that we're not literally blitzing ourselves into a problem. Because sometimes Nebraska will put itself in a coverage or a run fit bind based on its own aggression.
Sam, I'm not trying to sound over dramatic here, but biggest win of the rule era, considering the topics and the conversation that could have ensued, if not?
Yeah, absolutely. Wisconsin was the biggest win of the rule era for sure. Yeah, and maybe the biggest win of the rule era for several years, even if they get better. It was an enormously important game, and it could be the turning point in his tenure. I compared it on Monday to Fred Hoiberg, and I don't know what that game was in Hoiberg's tenure. Probably the Creighton win that he had in year 4, but just some of those performances that Hoiberg had in his 4th year remind me of what Rule's doing now, of figuring out the culture. This is my opinion. I think Matt Rule would disagree with me, and he's free to. He knows way more than I do. I don't know that making the roster smaller is going to be a bad thing. I think I think that they had too many guys on the roster who were probably not going to be thrilled with sticking around and not being sure what their role was going to be next year. So I don't know that Matt Rule making the NCAA forcing Matt Rule to make the roster smaller is going to hurt him as much as I think we've been said. I think Matt Rule can handle a smaller roster quite well, actually, and may actually benefit in some ways that he hasn't yet. So I do think that it was a turning point win, and I think they can do some good things from here. Beat Iowa? I don't know if they'll beat Iowa. Iowa, I think, is pretty darn good, but I do think they can win a bowl game, and I think they can have a great launching pad for next season.
Get ready for a heavy dose of Caleb Johnson on Friday night.
Yeah.
Sam, happy Thanksgiving to you and your wonderful family. Safe travels over to Iowa City.
All right, take care.
That's Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald.